We're in a message series, and our message series is taking us into a beautiful journey with Jesus. We're following closely in His steps. We're following Him closely. When you follow someone at a distance, the steps get just a little dusted over, and you're not sure exactly where they are or where they went. When you follow someone closely, you can see a little more clearly where their steps have been and where they are. You understand where they're going and where they're leading you if you're following them. When you get up close to Jesus, you can hear the heartbeat of Jesus. You can begin to understand and feel the things that matter to Him, and you begin to know what He is talking about and understand what matters to Him the most. We're going to be talking about seasons, different seasons we go through in this message. Now, a few weeks ago, a couple of weeks back, I went over to the Whitehall Mall. If you know where that is, say yes. Next to Kohl's, across from the pet shop. They have two wonderful massage chairs. Yes, they do. And they sit from about here to the first row of chairs from the wall. I kind of like to know my surroundings, my escape routes most of the time, so that's a little close, but I still like to have the massage enough that I will go sit there. On this particular day, I saw someone was sitting in the other chair. I'm way back here coming in, and so I like to go in the pet shop, and so I waddled in there thinking maybe that person would leave. So I waddled in the pet shop and walked around just a little bit, and as I walked around, I came back over to the entrance and looked and saw the person was still sitting there. And I thought to myself, I wonder who that is. So I had a conversation with myself, and finally myself decided to go sit down in the chair beside the other person. So I went over there, and I sat down, and I looked. There was a young man sitting there. He had a hoodie on. I couldn't really tell who it was until I just looked over. I still didn't know him. First time I'd ever seen him. But I said, would you like to take a ride in that chair? And I swiped it with my debit card. You know, if you put $1 in, you get 3 minutes. If you put 5 in, you get 15. So I swiped the 5, and I swiped the 5 on mine, and away we went. He had earbuds in. His earbuds were in, so I didn't want to interrupt him, but I was sure he was enjoying his massage. I said, it feels pretty good, doesn't it? And he acknowledged, and that was really the extent of the conversation. When I got up to leave, he looked up at me with a very kind face, a young guy, and he said, thanks. I said, you're welcome. Have a good day. Boom, I left, went on my way. This week, I went back over to the Whitehall Mall. You know where it is? Say yes. Now you know where the chairs are, right? Say yes. Yeah, you do. And so some of you are going to be going over there today. And you're going to sit down in one because you might even see me there. Don't hog it. But anyway, I see there's a guy over there with a hoodie on. He has a hood up, and I don't know who it is. And so I think, as I did before, if I go into the pet shop and just walk around, maybe his time will expire and he'll leave. Don't know who it is, right? Waddle around in the pet store, come out, see the person's still there. Being as bashful as I am, checking for security, looking around, I decide to walk over. I walk over and I look, and it's the same guy. Same guy sitting there that was the other day. Now, he had moved since. Different outfit, I'm sure. So I see him there. I sit down in my chair. He's sitting down in his chair. I said, you like to take a ride in that chair? Boom, swipe before he could answer, basically. 15 minutes for him, swipe my debit, 15 minutes for me, and I sat back to enjoy, thinking, I'm going to have a nice, quiet ride here again. And this time, he wants to talk. So we talk about the mall, how quiet it is, and what could happen, what story they could bring in to make this mall go better. We like it when people are thriving, when businesses are booming, because it helps the economy and it gives people a chance, right? And so we were talking small talk about that. And pretty soon he kind of moves from that, and with the earbuds now out of his ears, he's sitting there and he's talking about, hey, you know, man, I'm dealing with some stuff. He starts talking about relationships, and then he brings in the idea of faith, and pretty soon I think, well, you're going to talk about this. This is all right with me. So I never told him the entire time I was there anything about Jesus. I never told him what my name was. I didn't ask his name. But I said, well, we've got 2 out of 3, ain't bad. So we went with the God talk and with the faith talk and continued. And then the relationship stuff. And I started explaining to him about a little bit about some ideas of relationship, because he shared with me he'd had a relationship for about 1.5 years, and it ended, and he was heartbroken about it. It was a girlfriend. She had moved on, and now here he was. And I said to him something that I felt was very important. I said, you know what I know? You're a young guy. You've got a lot of future ahead of you. You don't need to jump off a bridge. You don't need to shoot yourself. You don't even need to think about those kind of thoughts. Man, you've got a lot of future ahead of you. I said, as a matter of fact, You're probably in the springtime of your life. You're getting ready to go into the summertime of your life. If that person can walk away from you, probably you want to just let them walk. They're not worth chasing down. If they can treat you that way now, what could they do to you later? But if she's supposed to return, she'll come back. But if she's not, just let her go. And here's the thing about it that I know. In my own life, I've been able, and we've had that God talk, faith talk, in relationship. I'm married to the same person for over 30 years. His eyes got that big. He'd never met anybody, I don't think, that had been married that long. And he looked at me like, wow, that's a long time. That's what I want. I said, well, you can have that. You put God here, and you're here, and she's here, and you guys start growing toward God. Guess what you can do? One decision, another decision, another decision. Pretty soon you've got 30 years under your belt. It's amazing how this works. Not that hard. Then I said, have you heard of love languages? And I started talking to him about love languages. And I said, you okay? I got permission. You okay if I keep talking? Yeah. So I started talking about the love languages, and I won't bore you with that. And I said to him, I said, you know what? I'm glad I made the choices I did. I'm glad I'm following God. And I'm glad I have faith in Him. Because now I'm entering the fall of my life. Spring was good. Summer was good. I think fall's going to be pretty good. And then I'm going to go into winter. I don't know how much fall I'll have. I don't know when my winter will be over. But it's been a good ride. And I think you can have one too. My ride ended on my chair, not my life. And so I got up. I said, see ya. He said, thanks, man. I said, cool. And I left. You know what? I'll go back to that chair. I might go back to that chair today. But I'll go back to that chair. If I live, if I can get there, I'll go back to that chair because I love it. When it goes up my back, it goes like this. Sometimes it goes rolling either side of my spine, and sometimes it goes rolling back. It grabs hold of my calves and squeezes them, and then it lets them go and says, I'll be back. And it comes back, and it lets them go. And then somebody turns loose a machine gun in that thing. It starts going off on my back. And I said, that one doesn't feel as good, does it? And he said, no, but I love it. And I'll go back. And I said, Lord, if I'm supposed to see him again and talk to him, I'm going to be listening to you for the next time when I'm there. If I get to talk about faith in God, I can't wait to present Jesus. But you've got seasons. I want to ask you a question today. What season are you in? Spring, summer, fall, winter. I want to ask you another question. If you're ready to receive it, please say yes. Yes. The seasons within the season are very important. When you slow the season down and say, what part of the season am I in? You begin to understand some things you won't understand if you're just looking big picture only. It helps you to be able to process what's going on. When you look at John chapter 13, you begin to understand that Jesus is teaching us something. And I never really thought of this until this message was coming to me. And as I was writing down the outlines for messages a few months ago and thinking about different passages, I was looking at this passage from a different perspective, but as I began to study, I began to realize what it was saying to me for today. And here's what I think Jesus is saying to us. I'm going to show you how to go out of one season and say goodbye to it, and how to enter another season and say hello to it. In other words, I'm going to let you go out of this season where you were and move into the season where you're getting ready to go, and I'm going to be with you in that season. And Jesus wants to help us. The first thing that I want to point out is this. Jesus knew the seasons of his life. He knew cognitively. He knew mentally. He knew experientially. He knew his seasons of life. Go back to chapter 2 and verse 4 in the Gospel of John. You see there it says, my time is not yet come. He knew what time it was. He knew what season it was. John chapter 7, verse 30, my time had not yet come. 8, verse 20, his time has not yet come. But the things begin to change when you reach chapter 12 of John. He says something interesting in verse 23. The hour has come for the Son of Man, referring to himself, to be glorified. The hour has come. There's something about understanding where you are. You begin to understand that this chapter is closing, that chapter is opening. One of the books we're reading together with our staff right now is Who Moved My Cheese? If you've studied that book at all, you understand that him and Ha are having trouble because they're wanting to go back to Station C and continually get the cheese, but they've eaten up most of the cheese. It's stale now. No new fresh cheese is there. It's old. So with that being old and closing down and that window shutting, they keep coming back and thinking, somebody ought to be bringing me new cheese. It ought to be the way it was. It ought to still be happening that way. But you know what? It's not happening that way. Things have changed. Times are a-changing. And they're being encouraged to consider new seasons. There's something to understanding the time and the season. Go to chapter 13, look at verse 1 of your text there. Jesus knew the time had come for him to leave this world and to go to his Father. He knows exactly the time this is. He's had the season when he was a little baby. The wise men would show up. Shepherds, all of that. He knows what it is to have his folks look for him at the temple, and he knew his hour. He knew his season then. He said, I'm about my Father's business. Didn't you know this? He knew what time it was when his mother nudged him at the wedding and said, it's time for you. And he says, okay, and he turns water into wine. First miracle, wedding, Cana of Galilee, powerful moment. And he starts this series of miracles and this incredible series of teaching when he calls his disciples around him because he has a season. That was the beginning of the season. Now we're seeing the end of that season as he's beginning to introduce to them the next season he's about ready to enter into. I ask you again, do you know the season of your life? Do you know where you are? Do you know what season it is within the season of your life? When you know the season of your life, you'll be on time. You'll be in step with reality. Some people try to hang on to the past. When they hit 50, they try to stay 20. Let me just suggest to you, you ain't 20 no more. You're 50. And just as you embrace 20, embrace 50. Not that bad. Matter of fact, you don't wake up at night hearing babies cry when you're 50. You get to go get ice cream whenever you want to when you're 50. You got little kids at home, they're bedtime, you're not going out to get ice cream. Can I get a witness in the house? Yeah, it's not all bad being, God has been there with you as you've been in these other seasons of life. And some of you are in the winter of your life and you're driving down the road of life in this new season of your life. And it's kind of like, I wish I was back there and could live it all again. But you know what the beauty is? Over one of these crests, over one of these hills, after you've come out on the other side of one of these valleys, there's going to be a bright light, and it's not a train. It's going to be the Lord himself standing there ready to greet you. Like the little old lady asked me one time out in Missouri, does it hurt to die? I said, I don't know. I haven't done it yet. What would you have said? I believe he's going to be there promising never to leave us and never forsake us. Amen? And he's going to be there to take us at the end of that next chapter. I can hardly wait. Sorry, Pam. I can hardly wait for that chapter to happen. I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to it. I don't want to get old. I'd like to skip that part. I don't really even want to die. I don't want to be there when I die. Well, I guess I'll have to be. But I'm looking forward to what's going to happen as soon as I do. Take that last breath. Can you imagine taking that last breath? No more asthma. No more diabetes. No more heart trouble. No more achy knees. No more bills to pay. Oh, my stars. No more lawn to cut. I don't even want to cut it this year. And no more lawn to cut. No more snow to shovel. Oh, that's going to be kind of like heaven. And then see Jesus. Are you kidding? Well, we've got these series of life. What season are you in? Jesus knew the season. Now, when you bring a little baby home, it's a wonderful thing, We have someone in the office about ready to have a baby. This week they're scheduled to, that's a due date. But they have another baby that's about 2. And I said to him this week, I said, it's going to be something when you take this little baby home and you introduce this baby to your toddler who used to be a little baby. You see, if you keep feeding these babies, they grow and they move into a new season, right? And then they become a kid running around, and then they become a teenager. And you don't really know where they came from. But if you're a teen sitting here, I remind you, your folks used to be a teenager. They ain't all they cracked up to be. They used to be a teeny bopper too. And they may have been cool or maybe not always cool. But anyway, and then you move into adulthood, young adulthood. Then you move into those mature years. And then you move into the winter of your life eventually. We go through seasons. What about marriage? Marriages go through seasons. That's what I talked about in the chair. Relationships and series that we go through. One of the greatest ones I ever heard of putting this was by Menareth, Newman, and Himfeld, talking about the passages of marriage. It's great to be able to go through them. Your 0 to 2 is young love. Your 3 to 10 is realistic love. You know, in the realistic love, one of the things very interesting about this is where we get down to 3 square meals a day. Trash truck comes on Monday, better get the trash out. We get down to that kind of, got to mow the yard, got to go to work, got to pay the bills. You kind of get into that. And before long, you kind of lose that feeling. If you married a feeling and now you're living in the rhythm and within your rhythm and now the rhythm of the family, you can fall out of love. No, really, you're falling out of feeling. Marriage is to a person, not a feeling. 11 through 25 is comfortable love. That's when you really understand the rhythm. The kids are getting big enough to help themselves if you have them. 26 to 35 is renewing love. The kids are leaving home. You look across the table and say, hey, who are you? And says, I'm your wife. Oh, I remember you. Or I'm your husband, whatever. And you begin to renew. Well, guess what? We're still together and we're going to be together and this is good. 36 and on is transcendent love, they say. That's where you're headed for the end zone. And you just say, let's just make this happen all the way. I love it when you look across the room and know what the other person's thinking. Isn't that fun? I like that. That's rich, man. You can't buy that. And you don't know that when you just get married. Don't say you do, you don't. You just think you do. As a matter of fact, you speak for the other person. But you know what the reality is? That's a mistake. You shouldn't do it. Let them speak for themselves. Seasons of generation. Scott Foster was teaching one of our, in a part of our lesson in the leadership. He was pulling from the writings of a 95-year-old person that is a friend of his, Marvin Martin, called The Four Generation, a book to the grandkids. You can see the breakdown there in your outline of life. But there are traps that we can get hung up in. We often do, and we try to live what isn't instead of what is. And Jesus didn't live in what was. Jesus lived in what currently is happening, lived in the present situation. And that's the admonition for all of us, to live with our life without having a real tight grip to where we can't let go of some stuff. I heard an expose from some power hitters of baseball this last week. And they were saying when they hit for power, their best power did not come when they were squeezing the sawdust out of the bat. Their best power came when they were holding the bat just loose enough to still hold on to it, but not let go of it when they swing. Because the beautiful thing is, they said, I get more power, more trajectory on the ball. It ends up being a better hit. I've hit some home runs, and the best home runs happen. I know this from experience. I used to hit a ball a mile. When you hit a ball, if you hit it right, it hits a sweet spot of the bat. You don't even hardly feel it. It's like a golf club. Bam! It's like, man, how'd I hit that? It's just hitting that sweet spot. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Do you know the time in your life? What season are you in? What season is it within your bigger season? Well, there's another thing that Jesus had going here in this new season. He knew what to do in his season. He knew what to do in each of his seasons. When he was 12, he was about his Father's business. When he starts his miracles, he starts the miracles and teachings. And that's where he calls his disciples. He knew what to do. He walked with them. He spent time with them. But he knew what to do. He doesn't just know the season. He knows the actions and the steps to take within the season. Verses 4 through 17 and following really cover this, in my opinion. In this season, Jesus knew it was time. It was time that he would be glorified through his death. His death looks like false accusation. It looks like incredible suffering. It looks like murder to us because that's really what it is from our vantage point. But in heaven, they see it as glorification. This is what he came to earth for. This is what he is here for. This is what he's doing. Oh man, the culmination of this season is happening. Did they enjoy telling the angels enjoy telling the shepherds to go see him in the manger? Yep. Did they enjoy showing up and helping him out in the wilderness? Yep. Did they enjoy all these other things they did? Yep. But this is the highest apex. And I've got a feeling here when he's on the cross saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? Heaven may have done a little bit of a turn away in this moment because of the sinfulness that was laid on him. The iniquity of us all, Isaiah writes. It's laid on him. Oh man, just think about that. I can't even imagine that. He who did no sin, who knew no sin, who is a perfect, spotless Son of God, our Creator, our Savior, hanging on the cross, and every vile, filthy thing, thought, action, deed, it is all laid on him. Oh man, in that moment he is there. And he's calling, time of my glorification is at hand. What's it mean for his glorification? He doesn't just look at the cross. He looks at the moment of his resurrection. And he says, I'm going to resurrect. He doesn't just stop looking at that in this whole idea of the glorification. He looks at the time when he's going to ascend. He's going to go back to the Father. And when he goes back to the Father, he's going to be seated, the Bible says, at the right hand of the Father. And you know what he's doing? He's making intercession for you and for me. Aren't you glad for that? When you pray, you're not just talking to an empty room. When you pray, you're not just talking to somebody around. You're talking to the Creator of the universe, who is glorified, seated at the right. And you know what else he said? I'm going to go and prepare a place for you. This is powerful. And then he says, in another season down the line, I'm coming back to get you. Man, is that going to be something? Can I get a witness in the house? But I don't think it stopped right there. He teaches us more things. He did one of the most unusual, if not odd things that you would do here. Did you notice he washed the disciples' feet? But really, he is teaching them, in my estimation, about salvation. He said, one of you hasn't been washed. That's Judas. That's imagery. That's picture. But the rest of you have been washed. I believe what he was saying to them is, you've believed in me. Judas never did. You've trusted in me. I am who you say I am. But he never has joined in. He understands this moment. Now, to come to a Passover dinner as they were now, gathered around the Passover dinner, they would have gone to the public bath and bathed ceremonially before they go to this meaningful meal. Now, as they come into this room, they have come from the bath to where they are, and their feet have dust, right? Their feet could have had mud if it was raining. So now what happens is Jesus takes off his outer garment, picks up the towel of a servant, and you and I read that and just keep reading. Stop. Let's look at it. What's it mean here? The Gentiles and the Jews had servants. So what kind of servant are we talking about? All the servants didn't wash feet. Some of the upper servants did not wash feet. The low-rung people did. Bottom shelf people did. They are the ones that cleaned up. And so they would come to wash the feet. And so Jesus tells Peter, he says, when he comes to Peter, he said, I'm ready to wash your feet. And Peter says, you're not washing my feet. What would you have said? You enter the passage? You ever enter the passage? You just read it. I enter in and say, what would I say? I probably would have been like Peter. I don't want you touching my feet. And he says, you don't really understand what I'm doing here. I'm giving you a demonstration. I don't think he's instituting a sacrament. I think he's instituting a demonstration. And he says to him, your whole body is washed in salvation. But the places you have been since you believed, the thoughts you've had, the things you've said, the things you've done, all of that stuff is represented by the dust on your feet. And I'm going to wash this off. You just need your feet washed. Peter still didn't get it. He said, well, wash my hands and my head too. And Jesus says, no, I'm going to wash your feet. Everything else is clean. I'm washing your feet. And Jesus kneels down and he begins to wash his feet with a basin, not a bath, a basin. And he takes that towel and he cleans him up right there on the spot. I think he's teaching them salvation. But I think something else, you may differ in the way I just explained that. That's okay. I get that out of 1 John chapter 1, verse 7 and verse 9 especially, that said, it talks about the blood in the active tense, continually cleansing us from all unrighteousness. I was saved, but I am being saved right now. So when I go to heaven, I am covered by the blood of Jesus Christ. Matter of fact, when I was a kid, we used to sing, "My sins are all covered by the blood." I love that song. Powerful song about the blood of Christ. It's an amazing thing. But I think Jesus is teaching something else. If you're ready to receive it, please say yes. All right, here's what I think he's teaching in this. I think Jesus, as he washes their feet, is showing the disciples a demonstration, a visible, visual expression of humility. Most of us don't excel in this area probably, but if you read in the other Gospels, like if you read in Luke, it doesn't tell you about the foot washing, but it tells you something else about this event and his perspective of this dinner. In Luke 22 and verse 24, it says, "A dispute arose among them as to which of them would be considered the greatest." Which one of them is considered the greatest? In other words, they were wondering who was going to get the promotion, who was going to get the corner office, who was going to live in the bigger house, who gets the biggest check. This is stuff the disciples are bickering over. We see them and we want to name churches after them. We want to build statues after them. Jesus looked at them and said, "You bunch of people, catch what I'm saying to you." He takes a towel, kneels down, and he begins to do what the lowest of the lowest in the society would do. Now look at verse 3 of John 13 of your passage. There's something important here. Jesus knew. He knew that the Father had put all things under his power, had given him all power and authority, and that he had come from God and he was returning to God. So he knows this, and he is there with them, and they're saying, "Don't wash my feet." And Jesus is sitting down and saying, no, gets down on the ground. Wasn't a real high moment for the disciples, was it? Tom Krattenmaker, writer for USA Today, said he went to Portland, Oregon, to the Burnside Bridge, where they would organize to help homeless people. He said it was one of the most audacious acts of service he had ever seen when he writes about it and tells about it later on. They would go meet with society's outcasts that lived there, and they would be meeting with them to shave them, to give them haircuts, to give them warm meals, and to wash their feet if they wanted it. Powerful. Could you imagine washing their feet? Can you imagine that? He said they would wash their feet and scrub them, immersing them in warm water. They would dry them off real nicely, and then they would powder them and put clean socks back on them. He writes this, "Washing someone's feet is an act best performed while kneeling." Humility. Given the washer's position, the unpleasant appearance, and the odor, can't you smell it? Of the homeless person's feet. It's hard to imagine a more humbling act. But the leader of the organization, as they were getting ready to go out, he would say this to them so they would understand what they were doing. He says, when you go out there, look in the face of a drunken person, look in the face of the homeless, and you may see the face of Jesus. That's what we're doing. We're following after Jesus. Jesus knew what time it was, but he knew what to do within the season, and what he did next within the season is very important. Verses 18 through 30, if you look at it here, he tells Judas, go ahead and do what you have to do. I believe that Judas was a little bit messed up because Judas wasn't from the area that the rest of the disciples were. And Judas was afraid of the governing people in his particular culture, that they would overwhelm him and they would get him for treason and they would possibly stone him or persecute him in some way. And I believe he was more scared of that than he was thinking that Jesus was going to have a successful run. He sees the end of Jesus and he sees a continuation of them. And Satan has already tempted him and put himself in the situation. So Judas goes. Jesus knew what to do in the season. Jesus looks at verse 31 through 38 to Peter and he says, hey, Peter, by the way, you're going to deny me. You're going to deny me 3 times. Peter's like, no. Jesus says, yes, you are. Paraphrasing slightly. Then look at verse 34 and 35. You see it? It's important. Jesus says, while I'm here and before I leave this season, before it's all over for me, I want to tell you something. I'm going to give you a new commandment. Now, he already knows back earlier in the chapter, all authority has been given to him from God. He has all that. He said, I'm giving to you a new commandment. Not giving you a suggestion, I'm giving you an instruction, he says here. This is powerful. New commandment I give to you is that you love one another. In other words, you get down and you wash the feet. My goodness, powerful. In a small Jewish community in Russia, the parishioners of the little church thought their rabbi went to heaven every Friday because they would see him every other day, but on Friday they didn't see him. And they thought, well, he goes to heaven on Friday. But a newcomer who just moved into the town says, oh, I'm not so convinced, he says to himself, I'm going to follow. And so from a distance he would watch and see what was going on. And on this particular day, it's Thursday, he sees the rabbi go into his home, dressed as a rabbi, living, acting as a rabbi, conducting rabbi business. Early the next morning, he sees a peasant with an axe coming out of the rabbi's house. He follows from his distance, keeping space between so the rabbi wouldn't see him or the peasant wouldn't see him. And he sees his peasant chop a bunch of wood. And the peasant takes the wood to a widow lady on the edge of town who has a son she's caring for, a very sick son. And then that peasant now, as the day's wearing on, makes his way back to the rabbi's house and goes in. The next morning, the rabbi would come out dressed as a rabbi. The people of the community would say now, in front of anyone and this new guy to the community, they would say, oh yeah, our rabbi goes to heaven every Friday. And he said, yes, and I think he might even go beyond there. Maybe he goes beyond there. Powerful. Powerful. What are we supposed to do with a message like this? Where do you go with this? What do you do with something like this? Well, let's look at it real quickly. If you're ready to look, say yes. All right, here we go. First off, we need to know the time. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 1 says, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the sun. Everything under the heavens. We need to know that time. Then we need to know what we are to do. Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 16 says, redeem the time. In other words, buy back the time. Make sure you're making the most of every time because the days are evil. So we want to have a clear purpose. Know the time. Know what you're to do in the season. And then I think this. We're to do everything under His lordship and under His leadership as a humble follower of our Savior. Verse 14 through 17, bear it out. Ed Rowell, writer, preacher, says several things very important. But he talks about one of his friends who was under a particular time crunch. He had to go to a place where he needed his suit. So he gets off work, and his suit needs to be dry cleaned. And he's thinking, oh, my stars, I've got to get that done. He remembers there's a place on the other side of town that would take care of dry cleaning. And so he's thinking, well, maybe I can go over there. Maybe they'll be able to help me out. They have a 1-hour cleaning service. He pulls up, parks his car, grabs his suit, runs in, and he says, hey, I need to know if you can help me out. I'm in a time crunch. I've got to be somewhere in a little bit. Could you help me out by cleaning my suit? I'll wait while you're cleaning it. And the lady behind the counter said, oh, no, it won't be ready now. You can come back in a couple of days and we'll have it ready. And she says, how about Thursday? And he says, I need it now. Your sign out here says 1 hour cleaning. And she said, that's just our sign. That's not what we do. We can get it to you. You know what happens? A lot of times we're not careful. We say we're a follower of Jesus. But if we're not careful, we don't even live like a follower of Jesus. This passage is calling us to walk closely to Him. And I think we can do this.